What if the worst day of your life turned out to be the beginning of something extraordinary? The day my father told me I was to marry the village's most pitied man, a poor, disabled tailor who hadn't walked straight since childhood, I thought my life was over. Everyone said it was a punishment, that I had brought shame to my family. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about me. It was about my stepmother, Malebo, and a secret she had buried so well, she thought no one would ever find it. At the time, I didn't understand why I was being thrown away like an unwanted seed. But what they meant for disgrace became the doorway to the truth, about my mother's death, my father's silence, and a man the world had already given up on. And none of them were ready for what I would uncover. And my name is Zinzi, daughter of Nkulu the hunter, born beneath the orange sun of an Eastern African village where the wind smells of firewood, earth, and river clay. Ours is a place of woven baskets, red dust paths, and stories passed down like heirlooms from grandmother to grandchild. When I was little, my mother, Nomsa, used to sing to me under the baobab tree at twilight. Her voice was soft as smoke, and her hands smelled like wild basil. She died when I was 5, some said it was sickness, others whispered poison. I remember only the silence that followed her last breath. After her death, my father remarried a woman named Malebo. At first, she smiled too much, touched my braids like she cared. But that sweetness spoiled quickly. Her true love was power, and her devotion was for her own daughter, Nyasha, a girl my age but treated like royalty while I was pushed further and further into the shadows of my own home. Malebo was clever. Not openly cruel, but calculating. It was in the small things, giving Nyasha the bigger bowl of stew, praising her laughter while criticizing my silence, making me fetch water 3 times in a day just to learn humility. My father changed too. He became quieter around me, as though unsure where I fit anymore. Or maybe afraid to confront what he saw happening. I learned to survive in the spaces between. I spent time with Mama Naka, the old herbalist who lived near the forest edge. Her hut smelled of dried herbs and secrets. She taught me how to grind roots, read dreams, and listen to the language of birds. With her, I felt seen. It was Mama Naka who first warned me, weeks before everything changed. "She's planning something," she muttered while crushing dried leaves with a stone pestle. "Malebo is a snake hiding in tall grass. And she's wrapping her coils around your future." I didn't know what she meant, until my father summoned me one hot morning, eyes distant, lips dry. "You'll marry Luthando tomorrow," he said, staring past my shoulder. "The tailor's son." The whole village knew Luthando, the boy with the twisted leg and burned neck, the one who limped through the market in silence. Poor. Alone. Scarred. That was the man they gave me to. And just like that, I became a story people pitied before they even heard it. The morning of my wedding was as silent as a graveyard. No ululations, no drums, no dancing feet brushing against the dust. Just a threadbare shawl thrown over my shoulders, the smell of sour porridge in my stomach, and the heat of shame on my neck as we walked to the edge of the village. Luthando stood outside his father's hut, leaning on a carved stick. His head was slightly bowed, face expressionless. His leg, twisted at the knee, trembled slightly under his weight. The villagers had always stared at him like he was a broken bowl, something once useful, now kept out of pity. I tried not to meet his eyes. If I looked too long, I was afraid I'd see the rest of my life reflected back at me. Small, forgotten, scarred. The first night, he gave me the sleeping mat and took the floor. "You don't have to do that," I muttered, not meeting his gaze. "I want to," he replied simply. That was all. In the following days, I waited for him to become cruel. I waited for slaps, for shouting, for resentment. Everyone expected me to suffer. Maybe part of me thought I deserved to. But Luthando never raised his voice. He cooked millet in the mornings and folded the blankets without a word. He moved slowly, with a quiet rhythm that began to disturb me, not because it was unpleasant, but because it was kind. I hated how it made me soften. One night, I caught him outside, struggling to lift a water pot with one arm while his leg buckled. "Let me help," I said, stepping forward. He looked startled. "I can manage." But I didn't move. I stood next to him until he let me take one side of the pot. As we walked back in silence, I asked, Why didn't you fight the marriage? He hesitated. Then, because I didn't want you to be here against your will. I told your father that. But he insisted. I saw something in your eyes the day we met. What did you see? That you knew pain. The kind that doesn't show on the skin. That night, I lay awake, staring at the thatched ceiling. His words echoed in my chest like footsteps in an empty house. A week later, Mama Naka came to visit. She didn't knock. Just entered like she belonged there, handing me a bundle of herbs and whispering, "Come see me when you're ready. There's more you need to know." Her eyes darted toward Luthando. I followed her gaze, confused. That afternoon, while Luthando mended a torn wrapper in the corner, I asked him, "Why do you live like this, away from everyone?" "They made up their minds about me long ago," he said, not looking up. "And I grew tired of trying to prove I'm not cursed." "But you're not," I said, too quickly. His hands paused. "Neither are you, Zinzi." Something broke in me at that moment. Maybe it was the last of my pride. Or maybe it was the idea that someone saw me, really saw me, for the first time since my mother died. Later that week, I went to Mama Naka's hut. She was waiting, sitting in the flickering light of a lantern, her hands wrapped around a bowl of thick tea. "She buried something," she said before I could speak. "Who?" "Malebo. Under the old baobab tree." I followed her through the trees until we reached the place. There, beneath the roots, we dug with our hands until we uncovered a faded cloth bundle. Inside were gold beads, my mother's carved comb, and a small jar still stained with dark residue. "She took from your mother, and gave her death in return," Mama Naka said. "That's why she cast you out. You remind her of the sin she buried." My legs gave way. I knelt in the dirt, holding the necklace I hadn't seen since I was 5. "She killed her," I whispered. "And now, she wants to erase me too." But as I stared at the ashes of my past, I felt something rise in me, not grief. Not fear. Resolve. And for the first time, I understood. Malebo hadn't thrown me away. She'd freed me. I returned home with my mother's necklace clutched in my hand, the gold beads digging into my palm like truth refusing to be hidden any longer. Malebo was sitting on the veranda, peeling cassava with short, efficient strokes. She didn't even look up when I approached. Just said, "What do you want, Zinzi?" I tossed the bundle onto the ground in front of her. The cloth unrolled, revealing the beads, the comb, the tiny jar. She froze. "Where did you get this?" Her voice was brittle. "You know where." Her eyes darted up, and for a moment, something cracked behind them. Fear, not guilt. That scared me more than anything. She wasn't sorry. She was only afraid of being caught. "You killed her," I said. "My mother." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Just the sound of the cassava knife slipping from her fingers and landing on the stone floor with a dull clink. "She was pregnant," I continued, my voice trembling. "With my father's second child. You knew. That's why you poisoned her." Still, she said nothing. But her silence confessed everything. You couldn't bear to let her give him another heir. One child was already too much competition for Nyasha. "You don't understand," she finally hissed, her voice low and trembling. "Nomsa had everything, your father, the village's love, even Mama Naka's favor. And me. I was just a shadow. Always second. Always waiting for scraps. You took her life," I whispered. "And you tried to erase me." "I gave you a chance she snapped. "You think I cast you out to punish you? No, I was giving you a way to disappear quietly, without anyone asking questions. Better that than having people dig too deep." Tears burned down my face, but my voice was steady. "You underestimated me." For a moment, the wind picked up, scattering dry leaves around us. It was as if the earth itself had paused to listen. My father emerged from the hut, his eyes red from sleep. He looked between me and Malebo, then down at the bundle. "What is this?" he asked, confused. "She poisoned Nomsa," I said flatly. "Mama Naka found the jar, the beads, everything. She hid the truth for years." He staggered back a step, like the air had been knocked from his lungs. No, that's not. But then he looked at Malebo, and whatever he saw on her face was enough. His shoulders collapsed. I suspected, he murmured. I saw how she envied her, but he couldn't finish. You chose silence, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And look where it brought us. The next day, word spread. Not from me. The village has its own way of listening. By dusk, people gathered outside Malebo's compound. No torches. No shouts. Just silence, and eyes that no longer looked at her with respect. Malebo left the next morning with Nyasha, disappearing down the western road. No one tried to stop them. Back in our small hut, Luthando sat beside me on the woven mat, his hand resting lightly on mine. I told him everything. The tree. The poison. The truth. When I finished, he said only, "You are stronger than they ever knew." I looked at him then, not as a punishment, not as a cage, but as the one person who had seen the real me before even I did. And just like that, the weight began to lift. Not because the story had ended, but because it had finally been told. It's strange, isn't it? How a story can turn like a river, twisting away from where everyone expected it to flow. I still live in that little hut with Luthando. Only now, it feels less like a sentence and more like a sanctuary. We've patched the roof together. He laughs more now, and when he laughs, the lines around his eyes fold like the pages of a well-loved book. Some days, we sit quietly in the doorway and watch the sun melt behind the hills. No words. Just peace. My father visits, but we both know the space between us is filled with things too old and heavy to name. He tries, though, in awkward offerings, a basket of mangoes, a repaired fishing net, the way he looks at me like he's trying to memorize the daughter he forgot to protect. I don't know if I'll ever truly forgive him. But maybe forgiveness isn't always a grand, one-time act. Maybe it's a quiet choice, made over and over again, each time we decide not to carry the weight another step. As for Malebo and Nyasha, no one's seen them since. Some say they went west to start over. Others believe the ancestors took care of what justice could not. I don't wish them harm. Just distance. Mama Naka says the earth always remembers. That every lie buried in the soil eventually pushes its way back to the surface, like a root growing toward light. And maybe that's what this was, my mother's truth, finally reaching for the sun. Sometimes, I still wear her necklace. Not because it's beautiful, though it is, but because it reminds me that even things stolen can be reclaimed. That I was never the discarded daughter. I was the seed meant to survive. Now, when the village girls pass me in the market, they no longer lower their eyes. They greet me. Some ask for herbs. Others for advice. And a few just want to know what it feels like to love someone the world overlooked. I tell them the truth. It feels like freedom. And sometimes, freedom comes dressed as misfortune, until you're brave enough to look it in the eye and call it by its real name.